Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of our Maximize Your Time at Home. We created this series for the Career Center to share with our students some things that you can be doing while we're all at home due to the virus. For a lot of us, we have some extra time on our hands, and so we want to use that time productively to be able to work on some things so that when we come out the other side of this, we'll be better prepared and better to deal, especially our seniors who are getting ready to graduate. So we are really, really lucky today to have Anthony Juliano with us. Anthony is the Vice President and General Manager for Asher Agency. And Anthony, you know what? We've known each other now for over a decade. That is crazy to believe, but
Yeah, it is.
we've been working together for a really long time. In addition to lots of things, he's just the social media guru here in Fort Wayne and in the state of Indiana. He really has done some great work. He teaches, he presents, and he uses his talents for good as well in terms of helping his clients at Asher, helping students. It just does a great job and has been very generous to Indiana Tech with his time and talents with the Career Center and with the university. I'd be amiss if I didn't say Anthony is also a member of our Board of Trustees and alumni of Indiana Tech. So he really does give his time and talent generously to the university. So thank you for that, Anthony. And I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks for that very generous introduction. It's always a pleasure to work with Indiana Tech, especially the folks in the Career Center. So thank you very much for being part of today's event. Well, I'm going to begin with some good news and some bad news. And I'm going to start with some necessary bad news, something that you already know, but is critical to everything we're going to talk about moving forward. The job market as we know it is changing. And because of some of the ripple effects of the coronavirus, the economic issues that we're seeing, it's going to get much, much more competitive in the near term. And that's true whether you're just entering the job market as a college student or if you're looking for your next opportunity. The bottom line is the job market as we knew it even a couple months ago is no longer in effect. What's in effect is a very tight job market with fewer and fewer opportunities. So what that means is we all have to take a different approach to telling our stories and our job search. And that's where the good news comes in, because we have a lot of control over what we do from here on out. As Cindy mentioned, right now, many of us, not all of us, but many of us have a little more discretionary time than we used to have. What I'm going to talk about today are some specific things you can do with social media, for the most part, that will greatly improve your chances of standing out in this competitive job environment. Now, for the college students who are part of today's session, one thing that I want to highlight is a shift that you're experiencing that sort of underscores everything I'm going to talk about today, an important shift to acknowledge. Because what's happening is this tool called social media, which for many of you up until this point was only relevant to your social life. You know, you use social media to connect with family and friends. This tool that was only relevant to your social life is starting to have a dramatic impact on your professional life. The two are starting to converge. And you have to think about social media as something more than just a tool you use to connect with the people you know, your family and friends. You have to think about the implications of everything you do on social media from this point moving forward. Think about the implications on your professional life. Now, I'm going to share some statistics that back up why this is true. In a number of recent studies, recruiters were asked whether they use social media to qualify candidates. In other words, when they are looking at job candidates, do they consider their social media profiles as part of their evaluation of those candidates? And the answer is almost universally yes. 97% of recruiters say they research candidates by way of social media, that they're looking at our personal social media profiles. Now, there's a little bit of good news in this, because in a study by Career Builder, it was determined that what candidates share on social media can actually help them. About 44% of hiring managers said that was true. But the bad news, unfortunately, outweighs the good news, because in the same study, 60% of hiring managers said they have eliminated candidates based on what they found on their social media profiles. So while it can help you, it can also hurt you, as you probably would expect. Now, some of you may be saying, okay, if it's more likely to hurt me than help me, then maybe I should just run away and not have a presence on social media whatsoever. Well, I want to caution you against doing that, because in the same study, 47% of employees said that if someone can't be found online, that's going to reflect negatively on that. And that's a reflection of the fact that employers today want us to have digital literacy in a number of different ways, regardless of what field we're going into. So the question that I'm here to help you answer today is, in this environment where the job market's getting more competitive, where it's absolutely a certainty that recruiters are going to be looking at your social media, what then should you do? How should you respond to this opportunity? How should you leverage what's good about social media and mitigate the risks that come with social media? Specifically, what I'm going to talk about for the time we have together today looks like this. I'm going to start with a few hard truths about hiring, things that may not be easy to hear, but I absolutely want you to know as you move forward with your job search. I'm going to talk about some social media pitfalls, some things that may be obvious to some of you, but some things that also aren't so obvious that recruiters and hiring managers are looking for, and things that can hold you back on your social media profiles. And then we're going to spend about half of our time accentuating the positive, talking about the things you can do to actively position yourself for success. In this section, I'm going to start by talking about having a foundation that points you in the right direction. I'm going to talk, for example, about 3 questions that you should be asking yourself in order to position yourself well from a social media standpoint. Then we're going to talk about the importance of LinkedIn. There's no tool that can serve you better in your job search than LinkedIn. I'll talk a little bit about why that is and what you do about it. I'm going to talk about the opportunity to create content. With many of us having more discretionary time than ever before, never been a better time to create content that can position you as an expert in your field. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the opportunities that exist to build relationships and participate in real world activity. The world gets back to something a little bit closer to normal, that can help you get results. And then we'll leave a little time at the end for wrap up and Q&A. I want to mention that if you have questions, those are welcome as we go in the chat box. We'll probably address the majority of those, if not all of them, at the end of the session as I go through the content. But certainly your questions are welcome, not just during the session, but you'll also have my contact info. I would encourage you to reach out to me after the session if there's something that you think of later down the line that you'd like to explore further. So let's start with the first of these topics, a few hard truths about hiring. Well, the first hard truth is something I've already mentioned, but I want to reinforce: the degree to which it's really competitive out there. It's going to get more competitive. And in this environment, managers have an imperative, a need to shrink the resume pile. Let me explain what I mean by that. It's estimated that for every corporate job that's available, about 250 candidates submit their resume. From that group, employers decide to interview only a small subsegment, about 4 to 6 of those candidates, and only 1 gets the job. Now, in this environment, I would like to be able to tell you that hiring managers methodically and diligently go through every resume, giving everyone every chance to get into the yes pile. Unfortunately, if I told you that, I'd be lying to you, because the truth is that's not what happens. And I know this from my experience as a hiring manager. When I'm confronted with a pile of 250 resumes, I'm going to try to, as quickly as possible, shrink that down to a more manageable pile. And what that means is I'm going to look for ways to disqualify people when I know that there's a lot of good candidates in that mix who deserve consideration. And that may mean if someone has a typo on their resume, even though you and I might agree that that is something that shouldn't make or break someone, it can in an environment when I'm looking at 250 resumes. If someone doesn't submit all the materials I ask for as part of the response to a post, That may disqualify someone. And certainly something on a social media profile can quickly disqualify someone who might otherwise be a good candidate when I'm sorting through this number of resumes. So there are things that I'm going to mention here that may not seem fair. You may say, well, really, should that make me or break me? The fact of the matter is, even if we could agree that maybe they shouldn't, they can and do, especially in a competitive environment. So let's talk about some of the specific things that employers look for on social media. One is information that supports their qualifications for the job. In other words, they look at your resume and they say, okay, now I'm going to go to this person's social media profiles. Is the information that I find there supportive of the case they've made in their resume and their cover letter, or does it take them a step back? And the site that has the biggest influence on this, or has the potential to have the biggest influence on this, is LinkedIn. I'll explore that a little more later. In addition, is the candidate a professional? Are they mature? Is the collective impression I get from their social media profiles that this person is going to be a good representative of my company? A key thing to remember is that recruiters and hiring managers, all they have to go on in many cases is the story that you present on paper, so to speak. You may be a great person, but if your online persona challenges that perception at all, it's going to hold you back, because that's all they have to go on before they have a chance to meet you. Absolutely, one of the things that can influence you is what other people are saying about you online. This is another place where LinkedIn can help, and I'll speak to that a little later. And then this one's really important. It may be that in this really competitive environment, it may be that when confronted with 250 resumes, that employers are looking really for any reason to disqualify someone. They certainly want to find a great candidate for that job, but there's a good chance that in that stack of resumes, they have a lot of good candidates. So if they can quickly disqualify someone, that's going to help them get that job done much more quickly. Now, a second hard truth I want to share with you is that the best candidate on paper doesn't always get the job. You know, I've had students who have said to me, you know, I had a 4.0, but I didn't get the job. What did I do wrong? Well, it's not necessarily you didn't do anything, that you did something wrong. It's just that someone else made a better case, because there's other things that factor in to the recruitment equation that I'll get to a little bit later. But you may think, based on GPA or other tangible things, that you're the best candidate for the job, but it's based on a number of different factors. What we're talking about here is the collective impression that people make, and there are certainly a lot of things that influence that impression. I'll get into that a little later as well. Now, this is maybe the most complex of these three hard truths. When it comes to what you should and shouldn't share on social media, there's certainly some things that I think we would all agree you shouldn't do. There are some things that we all agree would only help you. But there's a lot more gray area in the middle than you might imagine. You know, for those of you who are college students, you've been hearing for your entire lives about the stuff you shouldn't, you just shouldn't do on social media. I think you're pretty smart about that. I don't think we need to dwell upon that. I think you know, for example, that doing this, this example would only get you in trouble. This is an example of a social media user who worked at a daycare, and she posted photos of kids at the daycare that were derogatory, that poked fun at the kids, and not surprisingly, she got fired. I think we'd all agree that, you know, that's probably inevitable if you do things like that on social media, that it's going to get you in trouble. But when we talk about a gray area, I want to give you an example that speaks to the fact that things are not always that clear. This is a young woman named Ashley Payne. At the time this photo was taken, she was 24 years old. She was an elementary school teacher. And she happened to be on vacation, and she posted a photo where she was holding a glass of wine in one hand and a beer in the other. Well, you and I, if you asked all of us whether this is something that should get someone fired, I think based on that information, maybe the answer we would give is no. But the truth is, her school district had a policy that said teachers couldn't post content to social media that showed them consuming alcohol, and she violated that policy. Again, you and I could debate whether or not this is fair, but the reality is this led to Ashley Payne having to resign from her job. So the rules and what's expected are going to be different based on different audiences. I'll get into that more in just a second. But there's an analogy I want to give you, a metaphor I want to give you. You know, if you were to ask me, does this decision, the person I see here on the screen, the decision to have multiple visible tattoos and piercings, is that a good decision or a bad decision? Well, the way I would answer that question is I would say it depends. It depends on, just as one example, what's this person's goal? What does he want to do? You know, if his goal is to work for a bank, I would say this is a pretty bad decision. But if his goal is to work at a tattoo parlor, and that's his long-term goal, then maybe this is a really good decision, right? So you always have to factor in who the audience is. And the same is absolutely true for social media. So when it comes to how someone might respond to the content you share on social media, there are a number of things that matter and a number of things that influence their perception. Could be things like that person's age or their values. What did they grow up with? What were the social mores as they were growing up? And how does that affect their worldview today? And two different people may have very different values, very different worldviews. Another thing absolutely that makes a difference is the industry in which you want to work. You know, I've worked in a number of different industries. For about 5 years, I worked for a healthcare entity. That's a very conservative business. I worked for a law firm. That's a very conservative business. Today, I work for a marketing agency, and the rules are a lot more gray. There's not so much black and white. So the industry you aspire to be part of absolutely matters. The hiring manager or recruiter's past experience matters. And there are other factors that matter as well. Now, what I want to encourage you to do is to know as much as you can about the industry that you want to pursue, or the company you want to work for, or the types of people who you expect might be looking at your social media profiles. You can't predict absolutely everything that they're going to look favorably upon or unfavorably upon, but you can make some very educated guesses if you do your research. And if you say, I'm going to learn as much about this audience so I can customize my content to suit their needs. Now, there are things that we know are likely to hold you back, some social media pitfalls. So I'm going to speak to some things first that are pretty obvious that you probably know you shouldn't do. And then I'm going to talk about some things that are a little bit less obvious. Now, one of the things that I probably don't need to tell you is that if you post stuff that is too provocative, inappropriate, that's going to get you in trouble. And despite the fact that that's kind of common sense, all of us see examples of it every day. Now, this one is a little bit less clear to some people, you know, content about drinking or using drugs. I hear college students say to me, well, you know, I'm 21, so it doesn't matter. Or the more controversial one is with drug use. I hear college students say, well, it's inevitable that smoking pot's going to be legal in Indiana someday, so why should it matter? Well, the fact of the matter, it does. You know, it's not just for your friends and family, the content you're sharing. You have to understand how that looks in the eyes of an employer. So if you are making a shift because social media is starting to impact your professional life, you have to think differently about who the audience is for the content that you share. Absolutely discriminatory comments, even things that you think are made in jest, can hold you back. Negative comments about a previous employer or fellow employee. Remember, the recruiter or the hiring manager, likely all they have to go on is what's down on paper. They don't know you. They may misunderstand your intention, but if you post something negative about a previous employer or fellow employee, that person's going to think, well, what's going to stop them from saying the same types of things about me? Absolutely evidence of criminal behavior. This is where the drug use stuff comes in. Even minor offenses, if you will, employers are going to say that doesn't show really good judgment, and I'm not sure I want that person to represent my company. And then finally, one of the last ones that's somewhat obvious is something called self-absorption. Now, that could mean that I go to your Instagram page and all I see is selfies, but it goes beyond that. And here's a good description. It's preoccupation with yourself to the exclusion of others. Now, this can be hard to see in our own content, but one of the things I'd encourage you to do is to get some objective feedback, to find someone you trust to tell you the truth, and to have them look at your social media profiles and say, you know, if you were looking to hire someone, what are some things I've shared that might not reflect well upon me? And then listen to what that person has to say. to then take action based on what that person has to say. Because again, when we're used to using these tools to communicate with friends and family, sometimes the stuff we shouldn't be doing is less obvious than it should be. So absolutely you want to get that type of feedback. Now, there are some things that are less obvious that I want to share with you. And this is another case where we could discuss whether or not it's fair that people make judgment calls based on this, but they absolutely do. And that's evidence of poor communication skills. Because we think of social media as just being for an audience of our family and friends, a lot of times we're more lackadaisical with grammar and with style and those things. Now, please understand, I'm not saying you have to proofread everything you post on social media, but the collective impression you make, does it show that you have good communication skills, or does it show that those skills are lacking? And we know that communication skills are one of the things that's most important to prospective employers in all industries. In addition, sharing confidential information from previous employers. And this is something you can even do unintentionally. I saw an example when I was preparing for today's webinar, saw an example of a young man who was really thrilled to get his first paycheck. He took a photo of the paycheck and he shared it online. Well, unfortunately, there was some confidential information included on that paycheck and he was fired as a result. So it's really important once you start working for a company to look at their social media policy, to ask questions, to understand what can get you in trouble so that you don't post information that might hurt you with that employer or a future employer. This one's tricky because people don't often think of it. It's unprofessional screen names. You know, I may get your resume, think you're a great candidate. I may even have an interview with you and think that you'd be a great fit for your company. But if I go to Twitter, for example, and I see your Twitter handle is stonerdude420 at twitter.com, I'm probably not going to want to continue that conversation. So again, this is where that shift comes in. A lot of times we make these screen names when we're in social mode, and we do them sometimes for the entertainment of our family and friends, but they can really hold us back once our professional lives start to have an impact on our use of social media and vice versa. Lying about absences or even talking in jest about our commitment to our work. This is something I'm seeing a lot of right now. It's not unique to the coronavirus situation, but I see a lot of people posting things like, well, you know, I should be working right now, but I'm binge watching Netflix. That's really not something that represents you really well. So you want to be careful about that, not just in today's environment, but as things get back to a more normal state, if you will. Posting too often can hold you back. If an employer goes to your profile and it appears that you're kind of constantly on that social media platform, then maybe they're going to think you're a little bit less committed to your work than you should be. Argumentativeness, this is a big problem, especially now, not just because it's a presidential election year, but also because there's a lot of debate and discussion around COVID-19 and the coronavirus. So if you get caught up in that, you can come off as being argumentative. And it's a trap that many people fall into. You just want to avoid making that the norm for the way you interact on social media. Participating in offensive groups. Again, this could be something that you say, well, you know, that was just done in jest, but it doesn't look that way always to employers. And then finally, if somebody else tags you in content reflective of the stuff we talked about, that may not reflect so well upon you. This is where your privacy settings come in. And based on the nature of your relationships with those you're connected to on social media, you might want to think differently about how you allow people to tag you on social media. So that's a lot to be concerned about. There are a lot of red flags, but I want to emphasize something here. What's going to matter is the collective impression. If you do one of these things once, let's say you have a day when you're on Facebook, maybe more than you should be, or you know, at one point have a typo in a post, that individual action isn't necessarily going to make you or break you. I would argue there are some of these actions that would make you or break you individually, but it's the collective impression that you leave. Is it mostly positive or is it mostly negative? Does it make you appear to be a good employee, or is it going to hold you back? And that is a product of how often you mitigate challenges and problems like the ones I've talked about, and how much you leverage the opportunity to accentuate the positive. And that's where the next section comes in. And this is where I want to spend the majority of our time, because there are so many great ways to position yourself for success. In this section, I'm going to talk about some different strategies you can use, especially now when, as Cindy said, you may have a little more time to think about how the story you're telling on social media and how you're positioning yourself. How do you make sure that you're positioning yourself for success? So the first strategy I'd encourage you to consider is your answer to 3 questions. Now, here's the really good news. These 3 questions will serve you well now. If you're a college student, they're going to prepare you to make the right decisions for how you use social media heading into a job search or heading into launching your career. But even if you've been in your career for a long time, there's still a lot of value in considering these 3 questions. I can tell you that the people I work with who have answers to these 3 questions are some of the most fulfilled people that I know, and not incidentally, some of the most successful. And when I find people who are unfulfilled, it's because generally they haven't asked themselves these types of questions. So these questions will serve you well in the short run and in the long run. So first question is this: what is your goal? What is it that you want to happen? What is the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning? Now, if you're a college student, the good news is you don't have to say, here's my goal for the rest of my life. But it's really important to say, why am I doing what I'm doing? What is all this headed towards? For many of you, that might be headed towards a specific career. The reason it's so important to ask yourself this question and to come up with a good answer is that if you say, for example, okay, I'm an accounting student at Indiana Tech. My goal is to get a job with one of the big accounting firms. That's my goal. Then you're going to have a much clearer picture of what you should and shouldn't be doing on social media, because you know who your audience is, right? And that applies to whatever industry you want to go into, whatever career you want to pursue. Even if you're already in a career, knowing where you're headed makes it much more likely you will get there. Sounds like common sense, but a lot of people don't ask themselves this question. The other reason this question is so important is that I'm going to share some things with you that are going to require some work, and some of it is hard work. If you have a goal, if you know why you're putting in that work, it's going to be much more likely that you do in fact put in the work. If you don't know why you're taking the actions you're taking, much less likely. So there's a number of good reasons why you want to think about your goal, even if it's just, hey, here's what I want to happen in the next 18 months. If you can figure it out for the next 18 years, great. But even if it's just short term, that will serve you well. Second question I encourage you to ask yourself is this: what is it that you want to be known for? When people talk about you and you're not in the room, what do you hope they'll say? What talents, skills, knowledge, attributes do you want people to speak of when they speak of you? Now, you can't control what people say, but you absolutely can make it more likely that they say the types of things you want them to say if you're intentional about the evidence that you're putting out in the universe. And certainly that involves what you do, but it also involves the story you tell, and the story you tell specifically on social media. So the more you focus on your answer to this question, the more you have the ability to post the right type of stuff, because it'll be aligned with the story you ultimately want to tell. And the third question is related, but it's a little bit different. What problem do you solve, and for whom? Now, the reason I suggest this question is so important, it really comes back to the networking part of social networking, that this is ultimately about connecting your story to other people. And when you're in a typical networking environment, the questions people ask often sound like, what do you do? Or tell me about yourself. Well, when people ask those questions, I submit that what they're really asking is this: what problem do you solve, and for whom? And the reason that's so important, especially today, is that people are inundated with so much information that they have to be really great at sorting through that information and deciding who's relevant to me and the people I care about, and who isn't. And if someone is relevant to me or the people I care about, I'm going to want to learn more about who they are and what they do. So if you give people that information up front, if you can share without them even having to ask, or even infer this through your social media, what problem you solve and for whom, you're going to leapfrog other people who maybe don't get to that answer as quickly. So I really want to encourage you to think about your answers to those 3 questions. If you're a college student and you say, hey, I don't have this stuff figured out yet, that's totally fine. But I want to encourage you to keep working on it and keep thinking towards good answers, because it's one of the single best ways to accelerate your progress, including making it more likely you're going to use social media effectively. All right, so those are the three fundamental questions. A number of different reasons why I consider that you ask them of yourself. One of the many places they will help you is on LinkedIn. And that leads me to the second strategy that I would encourage you to put into action based on today's webinar, and that is graduating to LinkedIn. What do I mean by graduating to LinkedIn? Well, as I've mentioned a couple times, your professional life is absolutely starting to be impacted by your social life. That these tools that were only relevant to your social life up till a point in time during your college life, they're starting to also have an impact on your professional life. And when you look at all the major social media tools that we have access to, the majority of them, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc., the majority of them are designed for your social life primarily. The only tool that's designed to support your story in your professional life is LinkedIn. So as this shift is happening, as your social media use starts to have more of an impact on your professional life, you have to make some changes in how you use social media. And if I could tell you to do just one thing out of today's session, it would be to spend more productive time on LinkedIn and maybe a little bit less unproductive time on these other social media channels. Now, the main reason I say that is that social media, that of all the social media platforms, the one that recruiters and hiring managers really want you to be active on is LinkedIn. And here's just one example of a quote that reflects that. This is from Matt Earhart, who works in the recruiting industry. He says, ultimately, LinkedIn is the platform most of interest to me because it's the most relevant. It's where I can learn the most about people in their professional life. The flip side of that is the potential for other social media sites to hold you back. You know, when you look at where people are least likely to have problems, LinkedIn absolutely is where you're least likely to have something incriminate you. Only 4% say that that's where they find problems. But look at Facebook just as an example. 67% of hiring managers say, yep, Facebook is where we find problems. Now, you may say, okay, I'm not on Facebook, and I know a lot of young people aren't, but there's a absolute parallel between the degree to which something is relevant mostly to your social life and its ability to get in the way of your job search. So LinkedIn, the bottom line is, if you're looking for the place where you're least likely to have problems, at minimum, that's how I want you to think about LinkedIn. The flip side, of course, is it's the place that's most likely to help you in telling your story as a professional. Now, I'm going to talk about a few things that can set you apart on LinkedIn. Some things that I would highly encourage you to do that are going to make you stand out on LinkedIn. What I'm not going to talk about today, however, are the basics, because quite honestly, in the limited time that I have with you, I want to focus on things that you can't get just anywhere. And a lot of the basics of LinkedIn readily available on, through a Google search. So that information is valuable. You need to know the basics in order to get started. But I'm going to leapfrog past that and talk about some things that are a little more advanced. So some of you might be ready for this information. You might be able to take action on it right away. Some of you might need to ramp up to this information. That's totally okay. But when you talk about things that make a difference on LinkedIn, it does involve some more advanced strategies. One of the things that absolutely I would encourage you to do, regardless of whether you're a college student or further along in your career, is to make sure that your story is future facing. What I mean by that, in short, is that it's not just a reflection of the present state or your past experience as a professional. Because what most people do on LinkedIn is they build a profile and they say, okay, I'm going to tell my connections everything I've done from a job standpoint. I'm going to talk about everywhere I went to school, and I'm going to list all my skills. And what they don't do, or at least something that's much less frequent, is they don't pick and choose from that menu of options to present the best story they have to tell today and tomorrow. That they're talking about the present and the past, but they're not talking about things that are going to position them well for the future. I'm going to give you a really subtle example of this. It's just one example. There's a lot of things that go into having a future-facing profile on LinkedIn, but I'll give you one example specific to college students. Now, the example I'm going to use is the LinkedIn headline. The headline is the most prominent text that you see here on the screen. I've blurred out this person's name and face to protect the innocent, also because it's kind of immaterial. There's thousands of examples I could have used. But the headline is the thing here that says kinesiology student at Purdue University. And that's what a lot of college students do. They say, here's what I study, here's where I go to school. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but I think there is a better way. And this is really important when you understand that the headline is one of the things people will see most frequently. It follows you around wherever you go on LinkedIn. Post a status update, people see your headline. If you're found in search, people see your headline. Post to a group, people see your headline. So what I would encourage you to do instead is to either make a subtle change or a greater change, changes that look like this. A subtle change would be this. This is also a kinesiology student, but you'll see that she also refers to herself in her headline as an aspiring occupational therapist. Now, you might say, well, isn't that kind of obvious if she's a kinesiology student that she's an aspiring occupational therapist? And I would say, no, I don't think that's obvious at all. And when I present myself as being aligned with the career path that I want recruiters to think of me for, I'm going to have a much better chance of being relevant to them. So that's a subtle change, but I think it's a big difference in how it's perceived by recruiters. I like this approach even more. This is a young woman named Marta who refers to herself as a passionate marketer, not just a, hey, I aspire to do this, but I'm doing it. And I would say to college students, definitely don't overstep. Don't say anything that's untrue. But with what you're learning in school, you're a peer to the people who are doing it professionally. Yes, you're still learning, but you are making an investment that is providing you with real knowledge. Take credit for that. Again, don't overstep, don't say anything that's untrue, but position yourself as a peer to those already doing the work, and recruiters and your future coworkers will think of you or be more likely to think of you as a peer. So absolutely, you want to make your story future facing in a number of different ways. The headline is just one of them. One of the things I'd highly encourage you to do on LinkedIn as well is to request recommendations. I'm not talking about LinkedIn endorsements. LinkedIn endorsements are okay, but recommendations are even better. Recommendations are when one connection shares a paragraph about another connection, why that person is great at what they do. It's better than an endorsement because A, it's more substantive. There's more to it than just indicating, as an endorsement does, that you have a skill, more detail. But they're also better because they are much more rare. They stand out because they're much less common than endorsements. The good news is you only need about 2 or 3 recommendations. So I want you to think about the former employers or current employer for whom you've done your best work, or the instructors for whom you've performed best as a student. People who are very likely to say good things about you and then request a recommendation from them. There is a process for doing that on LinkedIn. I'm not going to get into that, but if it's a question for you, if you do a Google search and you can't find out how to request a recommendation, certainly ask me or the folks in the Career Center. We'd be happy to help. But yes, one of the best ways to tell your story is to get out of the way and let other people tell that story for you. The biggest difference maker on LinkedIn, the thing that is more likely to position you for success on LinkedIn than just about anything else, is consistently sharing posts, sharing status updates. The reason this is so important is because it's much more likely to make you visible with your network and much more likely that they are going to understand what you do much more quickly. Let me explain why this works and why it's so important. So the opportunity to post a status update on LinkedIn begins when you click on Start a Post on the homepage, and you can pair some text with a photo, some video content, a link to anything on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. When you do that, it has a fighting chance of being seen in the news feed by your connections. So let me explain why that is infinitely better than relying on your profile alone. If I don't do this, if I don't share posts, and I say, I'm just going to tell my story based on my profile, that's it. That's all I'm going to do. You're leaving a lot of things to chance. Because if you rely upon your profile alone, in order for people to hear your story, they're going to have to think of you out of thin air. you're going to have to spontaneously pop into that person's head. Then they're going to have to seek you out on LinkedIn, which sounds like no big deal, but names can be tricky. So they might misspell your name and not find you. And then if they land on your profile, they're confronted with years of your professional history, and then they have to digest that and come away with the story you hope to tell. Well, sharing status updates consistently takes away all those problems, because if I share status updates, and my recommendation is one status update a day, if you share one status update a day, you're going to be conspicuous in the news feed. People won't have to think out of you in thin air. Every time they see you in the status update, they are inevitably going to think about you. It's kind of like a billboard on the highway, right? You're driving down the highway, you're not thinking about food, you see a billboard for McDonald's, and all of a sudden, fries and a Coke sound pretty good, right? So it's the power of suggestion. Just inserting yourself into the news feed makes a world of difference in the likelihood that you'll be thought of and thought of for what you do because of the nature of LinkedIn than just about anything else you can do. So it also eliminates the need for them to seek you out through search. And because you're telling your stories a little soundbite at a time, that's what a post is, much more likely that's going to be digestible among your audience members. So status updates, content on LinkedIn, critically important. Now, in terms of what you should share, the good news is there's ample opportunity. There are a number of different things you can share on LinkedIn that will help tell your story. If you're a student, one of the best things you can do is share what you're learning, as long as what you're learning is relevant to the career path you want to pursue. Let's say you're an accounting major and you're taking a marketing class. Maybe the content relevant to marketing isn't specifically consistent with the career path you want to pursue, but you can still talk about how the accounting function in an organization is going to intersect with the marketing function, right? So there's always opportunities. I would say as college students, you have some of the best opportunities to share good stuff on LinkedIn. I'm going to talk a little bit later about content creation. Yes, that's a great thing to share on LinkedIn. Even if you don't create content on your own, just sharing the best stuff that you're reading, news that's relevant to your audience, is going to show people that you're paying attention to what's happening in a given industry and that you have a perspective on it. So there's a ton of opportunity to share good content on LinkedIn. It is one of the biggest differentiators. Another thing that can set you apart on LinkedIn is the way in which you interact with your network. What I would encourage you to do is to go beyond just connecting with people. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn who just kind of have connections. What I would encourage you to do is to do something with those connections, to use that network, leverage that network in a way that helps you, but that also helps those in your network. Really doing this well comes down to two things. It comes down to being visible. One of the best ways to be visible is through sharing posts, as we just discussed, but also to be generous with your network. One of the best ways to do this is to simply log on to LinkedIn, at least occasionally, with a perspective of helpfulness, saying, all right, I'm going to look for people asking questions that I can answer, that I have a good answer for, or people who might benefit from being connected to other people in my network. That alone is going to set you apart. I would also encourage you to help people simply by interacting with their content and sharing with their content when appropriate. I would encourage you to do things like status updates when you see a good one, to comment when you want to be part of the conversation, or to share others' content when it's worth being seen by your network. And you don't have to do this with every piece of content in your newsfeed, of course. I'd encourage you to do this a few times a day. That's enough over time to build relationships and to truly connect with your audience. Absolutely be as generous with recommendations and endorsements as you would hope others would be with you. And use LinkedIn to capitalize on the opportunity to make introductions. If there are two people in your network who might benefit from knowing each other, then certainly take the opportunity to be that convener. And I would also encourage you to use LinkedIn as a means by which you can check in or reconnect with those with whom you've lost touch. A good example for students is professors you've had in the past. I will tell you, as someone who teaches, it is always welcome for me to hear from students who were in one of my classes, even if they were in that class 3 or 4 years ago. If they reach out to me and say, hey, saw this article and I was thinking of you, or I'm taking this class and it reminded me of something we talked about in your class, or even, hey, I'd like to reconnect. Do you have time for a phone call or get together, for lunch? That's always welcome. And that's true of the majority of the faculty with whom you interact. So it's okay to reinvigorate a connection, even if you haven't talked to that person in a while. Generally, that's going to be very welcome. One of the things I like about LinkedIn is the degree to which you can kind of capture those connections and then periodically go through your LinkedIn connections and make decisions about, for example, who should I get back in touch with? So all kinds of opportunities to connect with people and not to just collect people on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is critically important, but there's other places in social media where you can tell your story. And that leads me to strategy number 3, which is content creation. And I will tell you that right now, this moment, there's a lot of negatives that come with the situation we're in. The fact that we're self-quarantined, there's a pandemic, and certainly, we need to be sensitive to the fact that this is impacting different people in different ways. But if you're one of the fortunate people who has your health and the people around you are healthy and you have discretionary time that you can use in any way that you choose, one of the best things you can do right now to position yourself well, regardless of whether you're a college student or if you're a little further along in your career, one of the best things you can do is tell your story through content creation. When I talk about the importance of content creation, I've been talking about it for the entire 10 years that Cindy and I have known each other, and maybe even longer than that. What I hear from people is, I don't have time. I don't have time to create content. And they'll say to me, how do you find the time to create content? And what I say to people is always the same. I say, you don't find time, you make time. And there's a number of different ways you can make content creation a greater priority. One of the things, if you're looking for an easy way to find more time to create content that is productive for you in the way you present yourself to the world, in job search, in personal branding, if you're looking for one of the best ways to find more time or create more time to create content, one of the things I'd encourage you to do is consume less of the content that is unproductive. Now, please understand, I'm pro fun. I want you to have a good time. I want you to do things like watch Netflix. I want you to do things that you enjoy in your downtime. But many of us do those things to excess. We say, I'm going to watch an hour of Netflix, and then 3 hours later, Netflix is asking you, are you still there? Or you say, I'm going to scroll through my Facebook feed for 10 minutes, and 45 minutes later, you're still going down the rabbit hole on Facebook. The fact that we make those mistakes isn't the problem, it's that we keep making those mistakes. And if we're honest with ourselves, many of us, if we consume less unproductive content, I'm not saying cut it out entirely, but stop doing the stuff that's unproductive and take back more of that time, you could tell a fantastic story on social media. And there's a number of different ways you could do it. You could do it through public speaking. You could share your perspective. I challenge, for those of you, the students who are on this webinar, I challenge you to become an expert in Gen Y or Gen Z, and then talk to business groups about presenting your expertise. You will have ample opportunity to speak in front of groups. If you can get comfortable with public speaking, and if you can learn the material, you would have ample opportunity to do that. And the only thing you have to do is make it a priority. It's a great way to get connected to people and a great opportunity, but it's not the only opportunity. Blogging, if writing is more your thing, blogging is available to you. One of the things that gets the best engagement of all the content you could create is video content. Certainly it takes some skill, but now's a great time to learn how to do it. As a matter of fact, that's one of the places where I'm investing my time right now, is learning more about video creation. Absolutely, maybe photography is your thing. Photo storytelling on platforms like Instagram. Those can also help you in your job search if they're aligned with the career you want to pursue. Podcasting, being a guest on a podcast or creating your own podcast. What I want to stress is it doesn't even matter which of these you choose, as long as you do something. If you have a story that you want to tell, if you have expertise you want to share, and please understand, you don't have to be the world's greatest expert on a topic in order to create content about that topic. You just need to have a perspective. I can assure you that there are college students doing it today who are getting recognized, who are being seen as experts because they're taking the time to make this a priority. There's never been a better time to do it. So I'd encourage you to use some of the time you have now, assuming you have discretionary time, to put it towards content creation. One of the best ways to position yourself well in the eyes of employers. All right, one more strategy for you, and that is to build relationships and invest in meaningful real world activity. I talked earlier about the fact that the quote unquote best candidate doesn't always get the job. And it's because there's a number of different factors that influence hiring managers and recruiters. And there are some things that matter as much and maybe even more than GPA. One of them is relationships. When I was a college student, people would say all the time, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I always hated that phrase because I thought it was unfair. Well, as I've gotten a little bit wiser and a lot older, I've realized that that phrase happens to be absolutely true. That you can have all the skills, knowledge, and talent in the world, but if you can't connect that skills, knowledge, and talent to other people, it's kind of all wasted. And I'm not the only person who thinks this. There's a lot of people who have said that very thing, including Tom Peters, who says the most important personal core competency any of us can have is by far a rich set of relationships. And I'm going to give you an example of how this can benefit you from a job search standpoint. It's an example from my own experience. There was a point a few years ago where the company I work for, we were looking to hire an entry-level employee. We were looking for someone who would have the opportunity to come in with limited amount of skill and start working for the company that I currently work for. So when I knew we had this opportunity, I did what I so often do. I went on to LinkedIn and I posted a status update saying, we're looking to hire this person. Here are a few of the skills we're looking for. Now, one of the people who saw that post was my connection, my friend, Nick Hulting, who at the time taught at Trine University. He saw we were looking for an entry-level employee, saw the qualifications we were looking for, and he said, I know just the guy for that job. And he pointed me to a then college student at Trine who was going to be graduating shortly. His name was Anthony, coincidentally. But Nick said, hey, not only does Anthony have the skills you're looking for, but he'd be a great cultural fit for your company, because Nick knew me and he knew what my company was all about. The story has a happy ending because Anthony did in fact get that job, but it never would have happened if he hadn't built a relationship with Nick. So I want to encourage you to make relationships a priority, to reinvest in the ones you already have and make new ones. So if you're a college student and you're listening to this webinar, one of the things I want you to do is to please, please, please do not hesitate. Connect with the folks in the Career Center. Yes, you should be connecting with your fellow students. Yes, you should be connecting with instructors. But the people in the Career Center, Cindy, Amy, Lauren, Mariana, and everyone else, they are there to help you. They are eager to help you, but they can't do it without you. You have to reach out to them. They've even created the virtual Career Center. They're doing events like this to stay connected to you. They're the ones who are the gatekeepers for the best jobs, best internships out there. So you want to know these people and the rest of the folks at the Career Center. So please build those relationships, build other relationships. One of the things that the Career Center folks can help you with is seeking out more formal ways of building relationships, internships being just one example. But I also want to go to bat for informational interviews. Informational interviews are when there's not a job opportunity at a company, but you reach out to a company because you want to learn more about that business, you want to learn more about the industry you're in, or maybe you want to learn more about the career path that someone pursued. And the benefits of informational interviews are really twofold. Number one, you do get that information, you learn more about a given career path, industry, or employer, but you also have the opportunity to make a connection with the individual you're speaking with. One of the best examples of that from my own experience was when a young man, Devontae Beckham, who's an Indiana Tech graduate, at the time he was an Indiana Tech student, he reached out to me and he said, hey, I want to learn more about Asher and what you do. And I was happy to give him a little bit of my time. And as a result of that interaction, I said, this is a great guy. He would be a great employee for a number of different companies. And when a local company called MedPro reached out to me and said, hey, we have an open position for an intern in marketing, do you know someone would be a great fit? I was able to make an introduction of Devontae to MedPro, and lo and behold, he got the job. So relationships are absolutely a difference maker. It is one of the most important things you can focus on. Now, there's some other things that can help you too. Absolutely, you want to get as much relevant experience as you can. One of the places you can do that is through volunteer efforts. College students often ask me, they say, how do you get experience when every job requires 3 to 5 years of experience? Well, that is a difficult challenge to overcome, but absolutely one of the ways you can sort of leapfrog past it is by doing volunteer work in the area you want to pursue. To partner with nonprofits and say, hey, I want to work in finance, so I want to sit on your finance committee and contribute, but also learn from people doing that work and build a relationship. So yes, having relevant experience matters, but really any experience, showing that you worked while you were in school, or that you were involved in on-campus groups or involved in athletics, that's going to help you out. So there's a number of different touch points that recruiters are looking for. And I want to emphasize, it's not just about the story you tell on social media. It's about you as a whole person. One of the reasons why I highly recommend you do this sort of thing is it gives you much more to talk about on social media that's relevant to the places you want to go. So it's the big picture. It is the things you do online, but it's also your offline relationship building and activity that's going to influence how you're perceived by recruiters. All right, so I know I've thrown a lot of information at you, but I want to give you just one more thing to think about before we get to questions. You know, the double-edged sword right now is that many of us have more discretionary time, but it's also easier to kind of put things off because there is so much that's uncertain, right? You may be thinking, well, I don't know if that internship opportunity is going to be available this summer. I don't know if that company is going to be hiring. The one thing, however, that you can control is what actions do you take out of this session and with the rest of your discretionary time. The one thing I want to leave you with is this. While there's a lot of temptation to wait, to learn how to use LinkedIn better, or to reach out to that prospective employer, or to meet the folks in the Career Center, there's a lot of potentially good reasons to wait. The best thing you can do is start right away. Because the sooner you start taking action, the sooner you start building a plan for yourself and following that plan, the more likely it is you're going to reach your goals. With that, I want to say thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for your time today. I hope this information has been helpful to you. If I can be of help to you in the future, you have my contact info on the screen. I'd love to hear from you. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Cindy for any questions you all have. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Anthony. That's some just great information. And I was kind of laughing about a couple of things, things that, you know, just I've seen happen before. Some of the, you mentioned maybe immature things that people sometimes do that ends up kind of giving people a bad kind of feeling about the individual because it just doesn't portray that professional. You know, we say in the Career Center, our job is to create confident, polished professionals that can articulate to an employer what they learned in the classroom, what they learned on their internship, and how they can contribute to the company right away. So definitely that's a big part of it. Somebody has a question about Facebook. It's from a student, Joshua Smith. He says, do we delete it or do we put time into it?
Yeah, that's a judgment call, and it really depends upon how well Facebook is working for you. And I'll give you some personal experience. I actually deleted Facebook for about 4 years because for me it had become an unproductive rabbit hole. It was a place I went and I was losing a lot of time to Facebook that I wasn't getting a lot of benefit out of. So for me, the right decision for 4 years was to completely delete Facebook. There was much more bad than good in the time I was spending on Facebook. And some of that was just productivity. I was busy and I said, this is a platform that's getting my attention without giving me much in return. So, you know, I will say this, you can still be on Facebook and make a good impression on employers, but the question you should be asking is Facebook a good use of my time? It's not mandatory to be on Facebook. I had a rich and fun and vibrant social life, even the 4 years that I was off Facebook. So it's not a bad decision to say no to it. It's also not necessarily a bad decision to say yes. It's all about what you share. It really doesn't matter what the platform is, as long as you're telling a story that reflects the story you want to tell, not just as a professional, but also to your family and friends. And that's why this is so complex. But it's a judgment call. The thing I want you to know is there is nothing that says you have to be on Facebook. You could delete it tomorrow and the world would still continue to spin and you would be just fine if you made that decision.
Great, thanks. Another question, it says, what about posting jokes or memes on social media?
Yeah, it all depends on what the joke is or what the meme is, right? And again, I want to emphasize that there are things you could post that one employer is not going to give a second look to. They're not going to think anything bad about it. And the next employer might say, oh, it's the worst thing I've ever seen. I would never hire that person. But If it seems like it's going to cross a line, and that's always a judgment call for each of us, I want you to be careful, even if you have your privacy settings locked down, even if you think it's just for your friends. I have seen several cases of people getting fired over something that they thought was just funny, right? We could debate certainly whether people are, a little bit too critical of each other on social media, but the bottom line, it does make a difference. So the only thing I can tell you is to be careful. Yes, I want you to have a sense of humor. Yes, I want you to have fun, but I want you to do that in a way that's responsible and that doesn't limit the opportunities available to you. So I would say proceed with caution. Yes, you can have a sense of humor, but you want to make sure that it's not going to be offensive to the types of people you want to connect with.
Yeah, that's a really great point. We had a cute meme today that had a picture of a little boy standing in the facing a window, and he was buck naked, and it said something about someday you're a great mom and someday your kid's standing in the window naked. And
Yeah.
maybe having that on some places might not. LinkedIn maybe wasn't the place for it, but
Yeah.
it was funny in the working moms with kids at home group. So I think it depends on what it is and where it is.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And another thing I'd encourage you to do is it's okay to at least occasionally have a sense of humor on LinkedIn. One of my friends is an attorney, and his world has been turned upside down, as many of ours has in the last month. He posted this beautiful posed photo of his family on LinkedIn and talked about how right now, working from home, none of them look like this right now. And that was one of the posts that got the best engagement for him of anything he's ever shared, because it revealed a little bit of humanity. It was funny, and it was reflective of what a lot of us are going through right now. So I just want you to have good judgment. If nothing else, if that was discovered, if something you post was discovered by an employee, by your grandma, whoever that sort of guiding light is in your life, would you want them to see it or not? If the answer is no, then maybe don't share it. If the answer is yes, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, great advice. Okay, we have a really great question. This is from Angela. She's an adult who returned to school, and she says, how do you get past that entry level position that you've been working in for 20 years to go to the next level after you graduate? So as an adult making that transition, you went back to school, you have your degree. How can you use LinkedIn to help you in that sense?
Angela, that's a great question. And first, I want to applaud you for going back to school. Some of my favorite people are people who continue their education a little bit later than the traditional path. So I applaud you for doing that. Good luck as you go ahead, and you're in a great place doing that at Indiana Tech. To your question, it really comes down to a few things. Number one, the best thing you can do is build relationships based on where you want to go. To connect with employers and say, hey, maybe I don't know you and you don't know me, but I'd love to learn more about your company. And then take that opportunity to build the relationship. One of the great things about LinkedIn is the ability to see who is connected to whom, to say, do I know someone at that company or in that industry who knows someone who I might want to get to know, and then asking for an introduction. So relationships are number one. Number two is the content you share. What's the story you're telling? Don't necessarily align the story with where you are today. Align the story with where you want to go. What is it that you can put out in the universe that says you're an expert about the thing employers are looking for? The personal example I'll give you of this is I'm not the most knowledgeable person about social media in Fort Wayne. I'm not the most knowledgeable person about social media, even probably on this call, but it's what I talk about. So when people think of me, they say, oh, that person must know what he's talking about when it comes to social media. Now I have to back that up with my work and with the content I share, but people will go where you take them as long as you can back it up with the real world. So if you have relationships going for you, where you're building relationships with people who can get you where you want to go, and if you're telling a story that's aligned with where you want to go, you're going to be much more likely to have the opportunities that you're looking for. I'd also encourage you to volunteer in a way that showcases the skills you want to be known for, right? That if today, let's say there's a lot of students I know who are maybe working in retail today, but they're going back to school so that they could work in healthcare, just as an example. What they should be talking about when they tell their story on social media is healthcare stuff, because then that's how the world will see them. They will see them as a healthcare professional. So you have to be able to have skills, knowledge, and talent, but connecting that to people, sharing stories that reflect that worldview, and where you can, volunteering in ways that help you build skills and relationships. That's how you start to overcome that barrier.
Great. One last question. We have some students who are in certain degree programs that sometimes say, oh, I don't need a LinkedIn because that's not where they're going to look for people in this particular profession. What would you say that we should say to them about that?
Yeah, I would say that there are cases where that may be true. And, I would say that LinkedIn is more important in some industries than others. But I want to go back to the fact that, you're never sure who's going to be looking at your profile. And while there are industries where it's less important than others, there's also hiring managers and recruiters where it's more important even within those industries. So even if you don't want to be very active on LinkedIn, even sort of being present in the space with a profile that reflects you pretty well can't hurt you. And if you just do a profile, it's not going to take you very long to set that up. So I would encourage you to have a profile, and maybe what changes is the degree to which you're active on LinkedIn. Maybe you don't need to be super active. Maybe you don't need to post once a day, but certainly I don't think there's much of a downside, because think of it this way. When employers go to LinkedIn, one of the things quite simply they're looking to do is to just verify that you're a good candidate. As I mentioned, when they're looking at social media profiles, they've already done some homework. Now they're saying, is there anything on the person's social media profile that makes me feel better or worse about them as a candidate? There are some recruiting managers, if they don't see you on LinkedIn, that's going to be a little negative. So take that off the table, have a profile that is static, that sits out there and serves you well. And then as your career ambitions change, if LinkedIn is more relevant to those future career ambitions, it's a little bit easier to use it if you're already up and running. So that would be my advice. I will say it is more important in some industries than others, but it can't hurt you to have a profile working for you sort of all the time in the background.
Oh, absolutely agree with that. Absolutely. Well, Anthony, thank you so much. Thanks for participating in today's webinar. And thanks to everybody who came. You're getting lots of big thank yous. Thank you, Anthony, in the chat box. We do have a couple of things coming up. We have Michelle Merritt is going to talk about the differences between LinkedIn recommendations and skills and endorsements next week. We're also having in our Tech for Success how to ask for recommendations on LinkedIn. So we do have some things coming up that are relevant to the LinkedIn and using it smartly in your job search and in your career. So folks, be on the lookout for those. But again, Anthony, thank you so much for being here today. And
Cindy, thank you. And thanks everybody for being part of this. Really, really love being part of the Indiana tech community. So thanks to everyone for joining.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. And stay healthy and well.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.